soon like you who has the illness of alcoholism, and I make up my mind, or I get in some trouble, or I make a promise to those children or that mother that I'm not going to drink anymore. And I'm sure each of you has had those experiences. I've sat across the kitchen table from my mother many, many times with her crying and me promising and saying, Mama, I'm not going to do it anymore. And I meant it. And I did it again. And I did it because if you have alcoholism the way I have alcoholism, alcohol is not my problem. Sobriety is my problem. I can't stand life sober. And I've got to find some way to live without alcohol where life is still coming at me, because AA doesn't promise us that life's not going to come at us. I've got to find some way to get comfortable enough in my own skin, no matter what's going on out there, that those bedevilments don't start to plague me again. Because if that happens, I'm going to drink again or blow my brains out. That's basically what it comes down to in alcoholic paradise. We can't stand being sober. And I didn't know any of this. I'm the kind of guy that the very first time I ever drank, I was 19 years old, freshman at Texas A&M. And I hadn't drank at that time because my mom had asked me to promise not to. My dad was an alcoholic. Her dad was an alcoholic. It runs through both sides of the family. And all the family believed the lie, if you just don't drink, you'll be okay. And that first night in San Antonio, Texas, April 21st, 1966. I know it because that's Aggie Muster Day, and it comes on the same day every year. I've lived in Texas my whole life. We went out to little Mexican cantinas and polka joints that night. I had never had a conversation with an Hispanic person. I had a fifth of Southern Comfort that night, and I talked to a bunch of them that night. And I drank all that Southern Comfort. I drank a lot of beer. I drank everything they put in front of me. I didn't get sick. I didn't get in a fight. I didn't get arrested. I don't remember a minute of the night. I didn't know anything about blackout. But you know what happened to me that night? I had fun. And I know I had fun because the next morning they told me I did. And some of you might remember the old days of Polaroid pictures. Now, I learned after this, you never keep any photographic evidence of the night before lying around. That information's going to come later. Sometimes I'll hear old timers in AA telling new people that it was tougher on us back in the day, and that's a lie. I am so glad I got sober before cell phones that I can't hardly stand it. Can you imagine some of the videos that would be bouncing out there forever? Some of the new people are going to have to put up with that forever. I'm glad they didn't have that going on. Polaroids were bad enough. And I had that period when I lived in my car for a few months. My car was a 1971 Buick Deuce and a quarter. Those things are 25 feet long. You can stretch out. You can have company over in a Buick Deuce and a quarter. Got a huge back seat. It's not all that hard to live in it. I think about young people today having to live in the back seat of a Kia or something like that. Hell, they'll have back trouble the rest of their lives. It was a lot easier back in our day if you had to live in your car. Some of y'all may have had the experience I've had. I've walked parking lots looking for change. Used to go to payphone that out stands of 8 or 10 payphones in one area. You young people can Google payphones and figure out what I'm talking about. And you could hit some of those phones just right. You could get some quarters to come out. But you could walk parking lots, and I could walk for 2 or 3 hours and find enough loose change to buy me a fifth of Crystal vodka. They can't do that today. Nobody uses money anymore. Everybody's using debit cards and credit cards. There's no change left on the ground for drunks to find. It's tougher today than it was back in the day. But nonetheless, I drank that night. They had those Polaroids. Now I'm 19 years old. Up until this time, I have been a dedicated, card-carrying member of Sex Without Partners. That's something that I had wanted to change terribly. And I don't know if anything happened that first night out, but in every one of those Polaroids of me, I was with women. And you know, I had my sponsor help me years later on when we're going through the doctor's opinion and through Bill's story. My motivation behind drinking, I believe the first 3 or 4 years, was just the idea that something might happen. I'm going to go out tonight. I got me a quart of whiskey. I'm going to go. Something might happen. And my sponsor had to show me that what that really meant is that no time in my life prior to that night with alcohol, and you got to look at your own life, no time had I ever really been comfortable in my own skin, right here, right now, doing what I was doing with the people I was doing it with. That idea that out there somewhere something might happen. And I'm not one of those that said every time I went out to drink, I wanted to get dead drunk. I didn't. I wanted to go party, raise hell, and chase women. Because I discovered for me, and you've got to look at it for you, you know, you can get with people that have never drank before. And you have to watch sometimes what we say and hear in AA meetings. If we're not careful, particularly the people that have never drank before, they can sit down with people like you and I, and they can give us a list 3 pages long of what alcohol does to people like us. And they tell us that, and they think we're crazy as the dickens because we can't see that. What they don't know is I'm not concerned about what alcohol is doing to me. Alcohol did something so much more for me in the beginning that what it was doing to me was unnoticeable. And they'll never know that. I'm not drinking because I want to go get drunk. I'm drinking because for me, in the beginning, alcohol was the first great spiritual awakening I ever had. It's like 4 or 5 drinks in, I'm a new guy. And it manifests itself differently with all of us. I tell folks I'm that guy early on. I can walk into a club and I've had nothing to drink. There can be 50 women in that club seated at tables by themselves. I haven't had anything to drink and I cannot walk across the room and ask them to dance. Can't do it. First of all, I can't dance. And secondly, I'm pretty sure they're going to say no and everybody's going to be watching. If they do say no, I'll have to book it. But you give me about 4 shots of whiskey, I start looking for a woman sitting with her husband and 4 brothers. It does something powerful. And dads, John Travolta's got nothing on me after about 4 shots of whiskey. If I go ask her and she says no, it's poor thing and go ask another one. Now, I've heard enough of your stories over the years to know that for all of us in the beginning, when it seemed like it really worked, for some of us, it allowed us to just be an instantly different person. For others, it allowed us to dream dreams. For some, there were trauma and events in our lives that it just allowed us to not feel it all. But in the beginning, alcohol did something so much more for me, and I presume for you. Why in the dickens wouldn't I drink it? It worked, or it gave the perception of working. Well, by July the 25th of 1994, I hadn't had that for the last 3 years. I was 47 years old. I never really tried to not drink until I was 42. Oh, I tried to go on dry runs. I tried not drinking so much, but the idea of never, ever drinking again was just not, it just wasn't attractive to me. And make no bones about it, new people. We're talking about a program that we surrender to one day at a time. But we're also talking about permanent sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous with no mental reservations whatsoever, the book says. Well, on that Monday morning, I hadn't been able to get those contacts out. I hadn't got a hold of Joe. They weren't my contacts. I'd taken them out of somebody's bathroom a few months before that. I was pretty bad about it. If I'm at your house, see something you're not using, I'll take it. And I wasn't having much luck with the women those last few years. I remember being in that bathroom saying, it's probably the glasses. I saw that contact case. I picked them up, put them in my pocket, went to the drugstore, got some of that stuff, learned how to put them in. Now I've got severe astigmatism. I'm nearsighted. I couldn't see a damn thing, but I'm sure I look good, and that's all that's important. I sat down that night and drank the rest of the whiskey and waited for the day to break, and I drove to a man's house, and here's the story of recovery that I hope to leave you with tonight. There's a few things that had to happen on that first day, or I wouldn't be here tonight. A few events that unfolded, and I promise you, if you're new, I didn't know anything about this for months and months, maybe for a couple of years, but it happened nonetheless. I'm broke. I've got about $7 or $8. It's the 25th of the month. That's all I've got to last the month. I stopped by 7-Eleven. I bought a cup of coffee, and I bought a $1 scratch-off ticket. Now, please hear this. I will believe to my dying day that had I gotten a $20 winner, I never would have gone to Joe Bell's office. As lost as I was, as surrounded by the hideous four horsemen of terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair, as having come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as I've been living it, a $20 winner would have probably sent me to the liquor store and to that man's office. And I hope to never forget that. I want to remember that you and I came in here on threads that were that fragile. I mean, we're just barely hanging on, and it takes everything we've got to just get brought into the rooms and to be able to stay here. And I want to remember that with every new person that walks in the door of any AA meeting. They're coming in on such a slender, fragile thread that it would be so easy to blow them off of that some way by just not being there available to reach out to them with what was so freely given to me by the people that were here when I got here. I'm so glad that I got in Odessa, Texas, where they weren't treating AA like it was some kind of fraternity or sorority. I never had my sponsor talk down to me. I never had any of that. Well, if you want this, you'll call me every morning at 6 o'clock and you'll do this and you'll do that. They weren't doing that kind of recovery. The guy that became my first sponsor, he called me every day, 2 or 3 times a day. I get in our book later on and I find out that Bob didn't go looking for Bill. Bill went looking for Bob. And if you read through our book, particularly the chapter Working with Others, every time it talks about the new man, it said, when approached by one of us, we don't wait for them to come to us. We're out there finding them. Now, I might can find them at Walmart or any place else, but I've got a heck of a lot better chance of finding one in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was taught that's why I attend meetings, not for what I can get, but for what I can give. And that we come to these meetings, find our recovery, and then we're here to be the hand when someone reaches out to us because they come in on the slender thread. Well, I didn't get a winner that morning. I went to this man's office, told him I thought I might have a little drinking problem. And you know what? He agreed with me. I don't know how he could have known. And I suddenly felt the urge to talk, and that son of a gun wouldn't shut up. I wanted to talk about me, and he started telling me about him. And I'm going to discuss, it probably took me 6 months to discover page 18 in our book. I just happened to call on a man who was properly armed with facts about himself. You know, it says in our book that an alcoholic properly armed with facts about themselves can often win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a matter of a few hours, not 5 minutes after the meeting. Not, here's my phone number, call me if you need something, in a matter of a few hours. And what I was shown in my home group is that when you come to a meeting, be prepared to stay 2 or 3 hours, because that might be the night that somebody new comes in and they're going to need a trip to the coffee shop. It's not going to happen very often, but Gary, you better always be prepared for it, because they were prepared for me that way when I got there. And my sponsor told me, I didn't get this early on, but he told me anyhow, one of the main reasons for surrendering to the steps is to become properly armed with facts about yourself. I can't be properly armed unless I've done an inventory, unless I've done a 5th step, unless I've taken a look at my more objectionable defects, unless I've made that list and gone out and made those amends. That 4 through 9, that armed with me with some facts about myself that I couldn't have discovered any other way. So he said, Gary, you're doing these steps not so you get to be happy and learn to love yourself and all this stuff. You're taking these steps for what you can do for other people. You'll hear from time to time in meetings, it's a selfish program. You have to do it for yourself. And if you're new here, I'll tell you, for me, that's one of the biggest lies we hear in AA. I don't surrender to this program for myself. I do it for other people. I have to do it myself, but I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for those 2 children. I'm doing it for that granddaughter that I don't even know I'm going to have for 9 more years. I'm doing it for my mother who's already. We do this stuff for others. It'll tell you very early in the book. As ex-problem drinkers, our very lives depend on our constant thought of others and how we might help meet their needs. And I had to have that stuff ground into me time and time again. Well, he took me to a meeting that day, not his home group. It was the first meeting available. Now, if you stay out there long enough, I didn't have the DTs my first 20 years drinking. I had them the last 7. Remember, it's a progressive illness. And by the way, we're not in here trying to find out who the worst alcoholic is. Actually, have you ever heard of a good one? Alcoholism is not a competition illness. And the program of AA is not a competition recovery. We're in here trying to surrender to the guidelines of this program, but I hope to God none of us ever believe I've got it down in a way that's better than other people have it down. I want to keep in mind the powerful spiritual words of our big book. Try, seek, effort, salt. There's not any, you got to do it this way or you're doing it wrong. You know, there is that line in the chapter to the agnostics. If we just make an approach, God comes all the way to meet us. So just be a seeker. You know, I would much rather be a practitioner of our program than to become a technician of the steps trying to teach recovery. It seems like it worked better in my life when people were sharing with me. But I don't remember that first meeting. I don't know if I got a desire chip. I don't know who was chairing. I don't remember anything. You stay out there long enough, you're going to lose the insurance. You're going to lose the family support. I've got 4 hard days of detox in front of me. And I was never alone during that time. The guy that's going to become my sponsor assigned some of his pigeons to me. And they were watching over me like birds watching over a June bug. I was going to 2 or 3 meetings a day, crazy as hell. And that's when I found out y'all like us better that way. And I don't remember much about that. I do remember a little bit. I believe I'm the only person in Odessa that's ever been chased by camels and giraffes. I remember that detox, it can be a scary time. So I always tell my folks, when you got a new people that comes in, don't stop your meeting and have one of those first step meetings. Hopefully every meeting of AA someone attends is a solution-based meeting. Hopefully they're not walking into one of those, how was your day? Or does anybody have something you need to get off your chest? Hopefully every meeting we attend is one where the solution is what's being shared about. Because new people are not going to listen to that first step stuff. Well, that's mostly for me to talk about. What I heard in that first meeting was God with skin on, with people taking care of me. And another thing that had to happen, I believe it was my 4th day. And this is probably the main thing I ever want to share in any meeting I ever talk about. I walked into the suburban group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and two of you, separate from each other, walked up to me and greeted me, and you called me by my name. The first thing I can ever remember hearing in one of your meetings was Gary. And it absolutely amazed me that somebody cared enough to remember my name. And I've never done this to a new person since then. But whoever was chairing that day, I just put out a cup of coffee I couldn't hold. I was shaking so bad. And they came up to me and handed me how it works. I never give that to new people. I always give that to people who have had the experience of knowing how it works. Because when he handed that to me, I couldn't hold it, I couldn't see it, I couldn't read it, but I couldn't stay there to be embarrassed. And to this day, I don't know who it was, but someone reached over my shoulder and took it and said, "That's okay, bud. I'll read it today. You can do it another day." I'm here tonight because I got dropped into a room full of alcoholics that somebody was keeping their eye on the door. My sponsor used to tell me that, get away from that new gal you're hot over. Get away from that group that's become your little clique. When you come into these rooms, keep one eye on the door. Nobody ever ought to walk into one of our rooms that somebody doesn't greet them and give a number and get a number, give a name and get a name. And we call them. That first sponsor called me every day, and after about 2 weeks, he called one day and said, Gary, I want you to hang up right quick and call me back. And I did. He said, do that again. And I did. And he said, okay, now you know how to do that. From now on, I want you to call me every morning. But I believe if he had started me with a rule to do that, I wouldn't be here tonight. When you go to a Zoom meeting, please keep your eye on the door. We have a lot of new people that come in here. We've got that chat feature. It's real easy to give a phone number and get a phone number. The people that come onto these meetings that are new and some that have really been hit hard by this year, they might be hanging by a slim thread tonight. And we don't have to be teachers of the program. There's just something really powerful about reaching out to one another and saying hi. It was good to see you on a meeting. Here's the numbers of the next meeting I'm going to. And we are the ones that know that I get drunk, but we stay sober. They didn't tell me that. They showed me. Well, the hour's going to end here in a minute. I can talk to you about the stuff. I had a sponsor that picked me up and took me to his house twice a week. We started on the blank page. We read the book, and when it came to the step, we took it. In my case, I was about 5 weeks sober when I wrote the 4th step and did my 5th step. The next week, I was doing the 8th step and starting the amends. I'm not here trying to tell people how you've got to take the steps. I'm sharing my experience. My experience was I was in here trying to learn recovery. And today I know my sponsor was not interested in me learning recovery. He was interested in me experiencing recovery. I didn't learn my alcoholism. I didn't go to process groups about it. I didn't read about it. One day at a time, one drink at a time, one behavior at a time, I experienced my descent into the pits of hell. And I had, thank God, a sponsor that knew I wasn't going to learn my way out. That day by day, action by action, I would have to experience my ascent back into the land of the living. The most spiritual word in AA is action. Action. And it doesn't matter how poorly we do it or how, just do it. We're being introduced to the steps, not as a college assignment, but as tools to learn how to use, because we're going to be doing it from now on. We'll never not be doing inventory and doing amends and doing all, we're just in the beginning. Just get handy with a pair of wire pliers. They're that simple of tools, and the more you use them, the more proficient you become with them. But the way to really get proficient with them is to show somebody else how to take them. I get so much more out of the people I sponsored than I ever got from my sponsor. And it just seems to be one of the paradoxes in here. Well, I'm going to shut up now, and I'll shut up with one other little nugget. I never had a sponsor that asked me to do gratitude lists and things like that. He called it a lot. Now, this is just him. Again, I'm not saying right or wrong, okay? He called that frothy emotional appeal. But I was about 20 years sober. And I realized, new people, I did do a gratitude list. The greatest gratitude list that I'll ever do in my life. It's called my 8th step. On that 8th step were both of those children. There was my brother. There was my dad and my mother. There was the children's mother and her parents. all those people to whom I owed amends to. And one of the greatest gifts of my life today is that list is now a gratitude list instead of a fear list and a resentment list. And because of the grace of God, trying to surrender to these steps and live this design for living, I get to have this really lame life I've got today. And I love my lame life. And I thank you and I thank God for making it possible. God bless you and thank you for allowing me to be a part of your meeting.